and the purpose, in essence, is tied to three things. It's number one, your core values. What is it that you really hold to be your core values? And we could have a process to do that. Two, what is your vision in life? And the vision, we have a hierarchy of fulfillment that we go through. It starts with spirituality, and then it works its way up to health and well-being, mental, emotional, and then to love and relationships, and then on into society, experiences you want to create, etc. And then it gets to business and finance, and everything that's going to drive all that stuff that starts foundational up. So you got core values, you got the 360 vision, and then the third piece is, what are your gifts? What are your talents? What are your strengths? What are your attributes? And we have assessments that we go through to really get clear on where your gifts are.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Family Biz Show. I'm your host, Michael Columbus from Family Wealth and Legacy in Rochester, New York, and we are super excited to be bringing you an incredible show. We're going to be talking about vision and creating a vision for transition within the family business that can really impact not just your life, but your entire team's life and your entire family's life. And we're joined by Chris Yonker today. And just welcome, Chris. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So we have kind of a tradition on the show when we get started. What I have found is that it's very few and far between did somebody start their career saying, I'm going to go to school and I can't wait to serve family businesses. And I would love to hear what was the Chris Yonker journey to get to the point where, family businesses were on your radar?
Okay. Well, let's see. It's one of those things that found me. The history is I started in sales, working at 3M, worked at 3M for actually over 25 years. Then somewhere, let's say 10, 12 years ago, I'd started doing some called private coaching. It was probably more life coaching at the time. And then a few years behind that, I started taking my experience helping businesses grow, working at 3M and working on strategy and sales and execution, taking that and bringing it into the small, medium business and helping small, medium businesses scale and grow, leveraging that. Well, then what I found is that the health of the organization would pull back the strategies we would implement. And it was like, well, wait a minute, like if this place, if in regards to like people don't trust each other, they're not open, they're not creating accountability, it just was creating a lot of issues. So I started studying Patrick Lencioni's work, bringing that work in. And then that led to, I realized that the mindset of the owner, the founder, the CEO, that controlled things as well in a massive way. And I couldn't outdo their paradigms, if you will. And so I trained with named Wyatt Woodsmall, someone who initially trained Tony Robbins when Tony was working on personal power. And I became a practitioner in neuro-linguistic programming, which is the science of behavior change. And I started bringing that into my work. And so now I went from someone who was focused on one thing to someone who's holistically focusing on growing an organization 360. Well, so I was working with a client, and he uses a very large financial advisory firm. And he said, I've got a family business and they've got a problem. There's some problems. And he says, a father and he has three, I'll call them kids, but the next generation, they weren't kids. Sure. And they're young adults. And he said, they're stuck. And we got an attorney involved and we're trying to figure out, they've got several businesses and we can't get on the same page. And I said, oh, okay. He goes, I'd like you to come in and see if you could work with them. And I'm like, oh, I don't do family business. And he's like, this is irrelevant. He said, I just come in and see if you can see where they're stuck. And I think you can help them. So I went in and I could see where they were stuck. And so I literally, Michael, I framed out an engagement and it's like, okay, well, here's how I work. And I just did it out of my head, whiteboarded it. And then we signed an agreement the next day and started. And then that led to other referrals, other engagements over the years. And now a majority of our business is family business.
Awesome. Yeah. No, I mean, and that's very typical in this industry. It's funny. I'm a little the opposite. I got interested in family businesses because my father and I were in business. And so I joined a family business support group, I'll call it, that was, part of my local chamber. And, 20 years ago, I was, the traditional, wealth advisor. And so when I joined the group, it was kind of like they're holding up the cross, go away, financial advisor, you're not allowed in this group. And I'm like, no, but I really need you. And it was great because, I just turned off anything other than, focusing on what I was going through with the relationship with my father. And it was really helpful. And that little piece was just like, you really want to, there's other people out there that are going through exactly the same stuff. Sure. You said, and I think this is super important. The very first client that, was a family business, you said you could see where they were stuck. Can you, without divulging any information, can you paint that picture, what stuck looked like for them?
So basically, so there's a situation where it was, there's three siblings. One of them had been in one of the primary businesses for the long haul, kind of grew up in the business. And he was kind of, he wasn't, to say the dad was the CEO and he was like the number two. Well, years had gone by and his brother was studying and doing some other things in business and decided he wanted to come back to the family business. So he went to his dad and he had quite grown some pretty strong leadership skills. So his dad brought him into the business and made him the other brother's boss. And his brother was kind of upset about that because I've been here. I've been the loyal one, So it kind of reminds us a story of the Bible almost. But anyway, so the sister who was involved with the business, well, she was, but she wasn't. She was drawing a good six-figure income, working extremely part-time, doing something that you could hire someone for, I don't know, $10,000 a year. And then so there was animosity about that. And so everyone's at this table with this animosity with one another, but no one was willing to talk about the animosity. And so it's like, so they're showing up at odds about trying to figure out how do we navigate who does what and what business, and with all this, the property and real estate holdings and everything else, there was already, it's like you can ignore and avoid what's going on, right? It's like having high blood pressure and just ignoring it, for so long until you end up at a crossroads, right? And that's kind of where things were at, and when we got to the heart of it.
So, for the sake of the listener, describe this company a little bit, if you don't mind. And again, without, just the picture, we got three siblings. Yep. We got dad. Yep. This is it sounds like, multiple businesses and pretty successful. Are we talking, right. A company that's doing over $10 million a year?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're talking collectively, it's probably 30, 40 million.
Yeah. And so, one of the things that I love to share with our audience is that when you get over $10 million of revenue, you're in the top 1% of businesses out there today. And so, it's not that you're not good. It's not that you're, you should need to be congratulated. You're doing great, incredible things, but we're talking about the moving the widgets part. We're talking about we're talking about doing business, working, in the business, but sometimes that working on the business, especially within the family business, we get a little off track because sometimes we run the business almost like we ran the family. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard for folks to separate the situation, like giving, for example, like you never would put someone in a position where you're paying them six figures a year to do a $10,000 a year job. But you do it for your daughter.
Yeah.
So those are the things that happen. And then you act like it's normal and fine. But then meanwhile, you've got employee, the CFO, who's not even a family member, is like, what the hell's going on here? It just creates all sorts of challenges. If you want to give someone money, then give them money, but you tie it to the business, it's going to impact the overall, the overall what's going on. Right.
Right. And it's a slippery slope, isn't it? It's, these things don't start out with going from, hey, come on in, my daughter, and I'm going to give you a six-figure job out of the gate. It's, we might have initially started her at $40,000 or $20,000, but then, she needed a raise. She needed something else. And we lack a culture of accountability that we expect for our non-family members, but we don't always expect the same for family members.
Right. And the interesting issue about that particular project is that when I started working with people, I started working with the family members one-on-one and then collectively as a group, both, because I can't out-coach if I'm working with a group, I can't out-coach the level I'll call it the lowest level or the highest level of dysfunction within an individual in relationship to that group, because otherwise I'm working around it, right? And come to find, doing purpose work, vision work with the daughter, is that she didn't want to be there. She wasn't even interested in being there, and quite frankly, she wanted to pursue a career in the medical profession, which had nothing to do with the businesses they were in, zero. And she was afraid to bring it up because she thought that, it would disappoint her father. And there was, and so there's also this relationship of wanting her dad to be proud of her and all those other business. And so needless to say, we worked through that. And through the transition, she was exited out of the business. Everyone was happy and amicable. And she was able to pursue. In fact, several years later, I got an email from her out of the blue, and initially I was like, "Who's this?" And I couldn't connect the dots right away because she had been married, and so she didn't have the same last name as the rest of the family and whatnot. Right? I'd forgotten. And needless to say, it was a picture of her dressed as a nurse, and she just got back from some volunteer work that she did, and just thanking me. And I thought, wow, how cool is that, right? How cool is that she was able to really pursue what she really wanted in her life. And then today, the dad's passed on, and then the other two brothers are still in the business.
That's great. We forget that as parents, one of the biggest jobs that we have is to help. It's not always about us, right? It's not about preserving our legacy or what we perceive as legacy, which, is really easy to project onto the next generation, the rising generation. And where we really need to be thinking about is, how do we help every family member pursue their genius, pursue their happiness, and help them to do that? And that's that recipe for that happy, healthy family, right?
Right. Yeah. And it's tough because you've got two different, it's like, if you look at how people normally navigate their life experience and in relation, and this is probably the part of my work that makes it probably a bit different, is we oftentimes are making decisions in relationship to what we decide that isn't totally truly aligned with what we want at the truth of ourselves. We're reflecting like, what's a family member want for us? What's a friend want for us? What's society want for us? We're constantly programmed in regards to how we like to define what success look like, what really is success, what's quality of life called, all these things that, we don't look at it this way, but in essence, that's kind of what's happening. And we've created this model of the world and how we truly want to navigate and drive these outcomes. And typically for business owners, People that are at the helm of a business, they're motivated by one of three things. It's either I want more power or authority, I want to be number one, or I want to be known. So each of these are three realms that people can pursue, these high achievers will pursue. And they're nice, but they only get you so far, because fulfillment's not found in being number one. Happiness is not found in having power and authority. I mean, these are things that we would, again, it's not logical. It's just the orientation. So you've got that sense of order. And so you're trying to satisfy these conditions to drive your happiness, your peace, fulfillment, your joy, and you can't figure out why you're not getting there. There's something absent. And what's absent is that you really truly haven't orientated to building a life that's tied to your purpose, because your purpose isn't tied to being number one or, having this power or authority. Your ego is. And so the work that I do, there's one part of transcending the ego, and there's another part of really dialing into what's our true purpose and what's that mean as we unpack that. And then how do we build a life that pulls us that way, so we can make better choices and decisions.
Love it. Love it. It's really, at the end of the day, it's not something that we talk about on a regular basis. We're not taught this stuff that, our how we think and how we act can actually be different. And when we have that, cognitive dissonance happening, it just causes all kinds of issues in what we're trying to, at the end of the day, what's really important to us, right?
That's right.
Talk about, and we want to keep going back to this family, if you don't mind, because I just think it's helpful to keep pulling it back together. Yeah. So you put a proposal together for them, and said, here's what it looks like. And I'm sure today that proposal might look a little different, but what does a proposal from Chris Yonker's organization look like? What is the kind of like the process that you talk about in the beginning before you start doing it?
Yeah, well, there's always several stages. And the first stage really is, we call it the blind spot discovery. It's in essence, all right, you've got some clarity in what maybe it's, you still don't know what you want. Like in a family business, it could be, I don't even really know if I want to pass this on to my kids holistically, if I want to bring someone else in. I don't know if we're going to sell this thing. I mean, I'm working with a family business right now. I'm like, well, maybe we sell it and then just go do something else as a family. I mean, there's never been a better time in history for a lot of businesses to sell right now. So that's on the table. And so you say, well, so you say, we know what you want. You may have a lot of questions, and that's okay. It's really understanding where are we, period. And the blind spot discovery, in essence, what we look to do is, and we're just finishing one up for a client right now, where we're interviewing employees, key stakeholders. We're interviewing it could be partners, strategic partners in the marketplace. We're interviewing customers, so the top customers, and we're just looking at who are we? What do we have to do? And we're looking at organizational health. We're looking at leadership. We're looking at client experience. And we're looking at the partnerships in the market. And then we're looking at the overall marketplace and where the business is going. And then we assess, okay, well, here's kind of where we are. And the bottom line is whether someone's passing it on, whether someone's selling the business internally, whether someone's selling the business externally, whether someone decides to convert the business to an ESOP, we can go on, all the options. Right. There isn't a time that I found that anyone wanted to transition a business and have the business worse off when they transitioned.
Right. 100%.
Right? So in essence, it's like, where are we against that? And if you're looking at the idea of succession, then that means you have to take the leader, the owner, depending on if they're in the business and involved with the business, let's assume that they are, which a lot of cases they are, then you need to make them insignificant to the business. So what's that mean? Right. So what's that mean? Right. I have to make them insignificant. So I have to look at what are they doing? I have to look at where they're involved. I have to look at, I've had several clients that say they want to be no longer at the helm of the business. They still want to be involved, but I want a back seat now. And I still want to be part owner, but I want to stick that as like a multi-stage, right? And which is totally cool to do. And the biggest issue in some of these cases is control.
Right.
Is control. So needless, they don't know that, right? But they have control issues. So, but bottom line is that the first stage is a discovery, and then we're able to say, okay, where are we at? What are we doing well? What are our risks right now? Where are the opportunities for growth? And then in essence, we come up with some recommendations, and it's all based on observations. There's no judgment. It's just this is what we heard from your clients. This is what your employees said to us. This is what, no one really, when we asked them what your core values were, no one could answer that question.
Yeah.
Right. We asked them, where's the business going to be in 5 years and where they saw the business going. They couldn't answer the question. And it's not. And so that tells us that you haven't defined it, or if you have done a poor job integrating it for people to own it, understand it. And it's again, not judgmental. It's just where we're at. And then now we can at least come up with, from there, that's stage one. From there, then now we can come up with 3 initiatives. Let's define 3 things that we agree are the biggest levers to pull right now. Is it developing certain people? Is it bringing other people in? And whatever that is. And then also on that next stage, it's me working with the owner, the CEO, the family, with each member, and really working through our purpose and vision process that we've laid out, so that they can really get clear. Because I don't know, should you sell it? I don't know what we should do. Why not? Because we haven't really articulated what you want your life to look like. We haven't really articulated where your core values are that we have to make sure we protect, because core values can be at risk during a transition or through a transition. So what are we looking to protect? And then from there, then it's like, okay, how do we, all of our clients, they want to keep their legacy. They want to protect the family. They want to protect the key stakeholders. And, they want on the other side of whatever this is, they want opportunity for everyone involved, per se. So that's
right.
That's it's a top, I guess a rough answer to your question.
No, that's great. And we kind of boil that down to, am I okay? Is my family okay? And then is my employee okay? And then finally after that, then I can think about, is the greater community okay? Yeah. And, what does this mean for, outside of that arena? I think you've done a really fabulous job in tackling and diving into an arena that I don't think is often talked about enough. And, and that is that CEO taking the time to step back to create the vision for what he or she really, really wants. And it's not just the CEO, but even some of the other stakeholders, like you said, the daughter didn't even really want to be a part of the business, right. But because the family's not having conversations. And I always, I'm a fan. I don't know if you know Tom Deans at all, or if you've heard that name, but he wrote a book called Every Family's Business. And in there, it's like 12 questions that every family should be doing. And his family had this really neat process where, each generation, they sold the business. So they had 3 generations of entrepreneurs, but every generation sold the business because they protected the wealth that way, because they didn't know if they had somebody coming up behind them or who was going to want to do it. And so in his book, he created just a little twist and just said, if somebody wants to take their hard-earned money and invest in the family enterprise and put skin in the game, that's a game changer in terms of whether they want to or not. That's somebody that really wants to make that happen. He said, right. On an annual basis, at least be talking about, if you're all in the business together, do you want to buy my shares? If you don't want to buy my shares, then you're an employee, and that's perfectly okay. But we don't have these conversations ever. I mean, it's right. They just don't happen. And so now as a CEO, I have a vision for what I want in the business. I have a vision of what I need to protect for myself. Right? Is that so it's, what are my core values and my core purpose? How do I get those things fulfilled when I leave what's going to happen? Maybe I don't, maybe I'm not letting go because I don't know how that's going to get fulfilled otherwise. Absolutely.
And to me, it's personal first. It's always personal first.
Okay.
Because, the way I look at it is, our business should fit into our life. Our life doesn't have, shouldn't fit into our business.
Sure.
And though people may have, not oriented it that way initially, at the end of the day, we realize that we're all going to die, but it's like life's short. And so, and a lot of the clients I work with are anywhere from, most of them are, I don't know, it could be 40 to 70, really, quite frankly,
Right.
Somewhere in that, I'll call it as in 40s, kind of like sort of the midlife range ish, about coming into the idea of, and that's when you start assessing things and start checking in. But just as you're saying, if my identity is tied to my business, which I mean, I've said that, but that's typically the case, especially with a business where you're dealing with first gen, founding the business. That's even more the case there. Then who am I? And actually, that's part of the process. That's actually one of the questions we go through. And it's a pretty deep question, what do I believe about myself? What do I believe about, and that is like, well, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to be happy? Well, if I've created these conditions in my business where I got to fix problems in my business to drive my significance in life, there's an opportunity there. If you wanted to, you could either say, okay, I got to find a place to do that over here, or perhaps you could change, grow, and heal some of that so that it's not necessary. And you could still, not that you wouldn't not do something, but maybe it's you'll serve on the board later on. Maybe it's you'll start a nonprofit. I mean, we can go on a list, but those ideas come later once we really get clear on your purpose. And the purpose, in essence, is tied to three things. It's number one, your core values. What is it that you really hold to be your core values? And we could have a process to do that. Two, what is your vision in life? And the vision, we have a hierarchy of fulfillment that we go through. It starts with spirituality, and then it works its way up to health and well-being, mental, emotional, and then to loving relationships, and then on into society, experiences you want to create, etc. And then it gets to business and finance and everything that's going to drive all that stuff that starts foundational up. So you got core values, you got the 360 vision. And then the third piece is, what are your gifts? What are your talents? What are your strengths? What are your attributes? And we have assessments that we go through to really get clear on where your gifts are. And we take those three things, we overlay them, and then that creates, in essence, the purpose, where it is that we want to be on point in someone's orientation.
Love it. I mean, and think about, man, the statement that's popping in my head right now is, if I only knew then, if I only knew now if I only knew then what I know now, right? And that exercise is not done. It's not talked about anywhere for the most part. I mean, you're talking about it, but I mean, it's not part of everyday conversations.
That's right.
And I can think of, several people who are just, they live, the ego drives.
That's right.
So much, and so it's like, the world sees them as this philanthropist, this giver, just all these wonderful things. And that's how the world perceives them. But then the people closest to them may see, that person that all they do is think about, it's them first. It's, I have moments where I erupt because I didn't get my way, or it's, about my time and my work and the business. And
right. Yeah. When we change our orientation, I have a client I've been working with a couple of years now, and he did sell his business. We weren't sure that first year. He wasn't sure what he was going to do. And he was telling me that now he's got some other things we're involved with and still working with him. But he told me the other day something that came up, and he goes, when this happened in the past, the old me would have left, not stayed home for dinner, wouldn't gone to the office and worked on this problem until whenever it was fixed. And the new me, so I can work on this tomorrow. And I stayed home and did X, Y, and Z. And he said it, but he says it's a different orientation, right? Because if I say I love my family and these things, then my time, energy, and effort should be focused on them. They shouldn't get the leftovers.
100%. It's funny because I was exposed to this kind of thinking early on, just reading books like, Think and Grow Rich and, The Power of Positive Thinking and, to people that had those kinds of concepts, for me, it took me years to be open to really understanding them. It was one thing to read them. It was another thing to embrace them and start to engage in them. And I think that was, in part my ego. It was really hard to kind of let go a little bit. And in recent years, it's even my wife, we were just talking about this the other day. She's like, the old you would not have been able to say, I'm frustrated, I just need a minute. You would have stomped out and been all mad and angry. And you just told me that you just needed a second to process the emotion. That was pretty cool. And that's the kind of thing that I think that as leaders, you're the most, it's that D personality or the A-type personality, whatever you want to call it, that rugged individualist who, it's my way or the highway. And I have to make these things happen because if I don't make them happen, my family doesn't eat. If it's especially in that first generation, they're doing it for, it's not, there's typically an embedded, reason as to, where it came from. It wasn't just because I had this great idea and I wanted to do it. There was a drive that really pushed it to another level, and unpacking those two pieces gets kind of tough.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, and you've done a bunch of this. So now that I'm armed with my vision and I understand, my purpose and my core values, and I have this vision for my world. And you've talked about how do you blend that with the business and the transition and putting all those pieces together. You also talked about, I want to make sure that people caught it. You talk about basically you're creating this map for where they are right now. And that map has all of my vendors and my customers and my key employees and, the sandbox that we play in and what we're really good at and a SWOT analysis and putting all that on one page. I'll tell you what, I have not walked into any business ever where the owner said, that they can, it's all in their head, but when they see it on paper, it's so much different because there's patterns and there's things that happen inside of their, add my competitors on there. And what do my competitors do well versus what we're doing? It's a big difference. So now I've got my vision, I've got my map of where I am today. And now I'm going to start working through a process that's multifaceted. Talk about that a little bit more.
So then in essence, you see, now we got the personal, so say the personal side kind of laid out a little bit, right? And then we've assessed where the business is at. Well, the next order of business is, okay, well, based on what I'm trying to drive for myself and the family, where ideally do we want our business? So we got the core values of the business, which we'll make sure we define if we haven't already. And then the mission of the business, make sure that's defined if we haven't, why do we exist, basically? Why do we exist? And then the vision, the vision is where are we going, right? Where are we going? Where is it that we're headed? And what do we want to do? And it's, I'm working with a family-owned food and beverage company right now, and more is not always better. Let's just say they're, I'll just throw a number out. This is not the accurate number. Let's just throw one out. So let's say they're at 15 million. Just because they're at 15 million doesn't need that they should be at 45. Maybe 25 is perfect for them. And then we can look at where do they make their most money, right? Where are they most profitable? What's their, where is it that they make the biggest difference, the biggest impact, where, their edge, and where are there opportunities to grow that edge in the marketplace? So there's the path of the business and where we want the business to go. And you can also look at, I am not a Traction implementer, but systems like Traction, I have clients that work with Traction. They're really good, right? And I believe every company needs to have process in how at 3M, we used it, process. I built process out. there's got to be some level of process of, okay, what's our strategy? And then what's our execution? Like, how do we going to execute against that? And I believe in a quarterly basis that's tied to where we want to go for the year. I believe that 90-day windows are really pretty essential. And with that being said, at that same time, one things we're working on is the organizational health. Let's work on, we work through Patrick Lencioni's work, the 5 dysfunctions of a team, where let's improve vulnerability. Let's get artificial harmony out of the equation as much as possible. And with that in a leadership team. And then that also with who else do we need to develop on the leadership team? Do we need other people? And where do we need to raise our levels there? And then there's some mentoring that myself and my team will do with that leadership team to help them individually develop. And then we're doing working sessions as we lay out these priorities and say, okay, let's get everyone rowing together in relationship to, you got to take self-interest off the table when you're in an organization from department, right? And so how do we get these departments to the goal of any type of succession, the goal of really even transitioning a business is getting everyone to understand that if we all agree to the vision, mission, and core values of our company, where our business is going, and I have this overarching direction of the business, if I believe that I do what's best here is also what's good for me here, then I'll march into that. And if I believe that that's taken away from me, then that's where the issues come. And the biggest sales job, I guess you could say for me, is influencing people in a positive way to realize that truly, if we do what's best for the greater whole, it's good for you as well. It's not taking anything away from you, and you can still get to where you want to go by committing to the overall mission of what we want. And I think if you look at any contributor in an organization, any key stakeholder, and any time there's succession or transition on the table, and I know you know this, Michael, but is that everyone's going like, what does that mean to me? Am I going to be, what's going to happen to me with all this, right? So we've really got to, I put that, it's like, hey man, if we don't fill in those blanks, hear about them. Do they know that you can get them to where they want to go? And the only way they'll know if you can get them to where they want to go is if you know where the hell they want to go.
Smart, very smart. Yeah, it's fun. I'm laughing as you're talking about this because last Thursday and Friday we did a 2-day kickoff, and it was my second take on working with this company. They kept pushing me off. 2 years ago we started. Then they're like, nah, we don't want to do this. And then, they're like, all right, you're right. We have to do this. If we don't do this, and that was the family allowing non-family members that are part of the leadership team to create the plan together. Because if, in my opinion, if they're not working together to create that plan, they don't get weigh-in. How are they going to buy in? And so as we're going through what happened 2 years ago is there was lots of ideas, very little commitment to a direction. And you could just see the same thing happening. So I just pulled it back up again. I had talked about Pat's triangle, and it's the pyramid rather. And it's like, look, you guys say you trust each other. And I believe that you trust each other because I can see that you're having conflict about really good things, and nobody's afraid of that conflict. It's really good. But where you guys stink is that you guys need to commit to something. And it just followed, and so we went back to it. I said, look, here's the deal. You have 15 minutes to make up what are the top 3 priorities for this year. And we're going to commit to them, and we're going to go forward with it because it's time. And so they worked through, and in 15 minutes, it was crazy. They were able to come up with, their 3 priorities. But to your point, I think that there's some other underlying things. So I'm not a traction implementer. I utilize metronomics, the 3-head way, which they're all coming from the same, world. We talk about the cohesive system, which is that trust and powered by Patrick Lencioni and getting those things to happen. But there's that individual piece of each of the leadership team members. Go back. What's everybody's favorite radio station, right? What's in it for me? WIIFM. So that's I might have a little bit more work to do back there to take a step back to say, where do you all want to go? What is going on for you, so that they can be there. This is powerful, powerful stuff. I really appreciate, everything that you're sharing. Once we start to have these conversations where, we are blending the business strategy and the leadership and at the end of, the psychological insights from kind of like your NLP. And a lot of times, let me just hit NLP real quick, neuro-linguistic programming. A lot of times when people hear those words, they're like, it's like, what's he going to do? Brainwash me? And that's not it at all, is it? I mean, NLP is all about, it's the words that we say in our own brains and how they impact our lives. And I mean, you may have a better way to explain that. Why don't you do that real quick?
Well, in essence, we all have a model of the world, and our model of the world is constructed of our paradigms, our beliefs, our constructs, if you will, in relationship to everything, who we are, how the world works. I mean, down to the core. And yes, correct. Our language is a big part of it, right? We're taking our world from our visual, auditory, kinesthetic. You take your five senses, and we bring all that in, and then our subconscious mind filters that information out and determines our response and our emotional response, and it unconsciously anyway. And in essence, it's how we make decisions, and it's how we orientate ourselves, and it's even how we can show up as a person, quite frankly, and how we behave. And if you're looking to fundamentally drive any type of change personally, it's a very powerful system to drive change. It's really NLP at the root of it is about changing. And so as you become a practitioner, you're able to help unpack how someone really, what's driving them, and then help them create new frames. In essence, what my goal is to help challenge the beliefs that we hold that are not beliefs that are helping us get to where we want to go, that are disempowering, if you will.
Right.
And so that's and I've chosen to center a lot of my work there around that mindset, because the mindset drives everything. I remember I was working with someone in sales, it was a long time ago, and she was like, "Well, so your philosophy is that that sales is about psychology, and that's your take on sales." I'm thinking like, well, is there really another take? Like, I'm like, I was really having a hard time with that. I still do. Like, what's the other take? Like, it is psychology. Right. It's all psychology, because it's what our thinking's what. Either whether it's consciously we're aware of it, or subconsciously we're unaware, it still drives everything. And so, and for me, I've had NLP gave me the ability to understand a lot of what came to me naturally. I just wasn't aware that so I was able to. It really helped me amplify my gift.
Yeah. And I will throw in, that I am not a practitioner of NLP. Somewhere along the lines, as I open up my time slots a little bit more, I think I would like to spend some time in it, because, whether, I look back today, I can think about my emotions. I can put my fingers on what am I feeling and why am I feeling it? What are these things that are triggers? And, those triggers happen to us over and over again. And the question then becomes, do you scratch that record? And that's kind of what NLP does, is you have this habit. And normally when this happens, your emotional response is X, Y happens and your response is X. And there's not even a millisecond in between what happened and the response. And what NLP does is kind of scratches that record and allows you to react to what's going on, so that you can actually put your fingers on and say, oh, I'm feeling that old trigger again. Hold on a second, and where do I go with this?
Yeah. You can basically create a new, basically a rewiring, in regards to how something affects you. And it's extremely powerful.
I love it. I love it. And I know a lot of people that may be listening to this say, "Ooh, that sounds touchy-feely," and
that's your belief. That's your model of the world. You call it what you want.
Exactly. And right. But at the end of the day, you don't have to understand the rules of gravity, but if you drop that pencil, it's still falling to the floor.
Yeah.
And once you start to understand that our brains are just a computer, and that it just has been programmed over your whole entire lifetime, right. And like it or not, some of that wiring is really good, and that's probably what drove the success of your business. But if you're stalling, if there's things that are happening, like, what if I'm 68 years old and I've said for the last 10 years, I want to retire, I want to pass this on. I might have even, passed on the business to my daughter, and I may not be the owner any longer, but I'm still running the company because, I just haven't been able to extract myself because of that word that you said before, control, and my view of the world and my thinking around what this company needs. And for goodness sake, there's 150 families here that, depend on me. And so now I'm still working 50 or 60 hours a week at 68 years old. And that was not what I had intended.
Yeah. Well, you said something pretty powerful, is that if, any high achiever, anyone who's created success, you've developed these amazing strategies and habits. Those amazing habits and strategies almost always don't get you to the next place you want to go. They'll get you to that point in your business, but they become the prison that holds you back from the next thing. And that's where, that's the power of the work, quite frankly. And I think the essence is that, like you just said, and you also said, which I was really, really great in relationship to all the conditions of why I can't. I've been wanting to, but I can't, right? And when we get into the I can't, it's, in essence, it's called a story.
Yeah.
And a story is the illusion that we've created for ourselves, that first we have to believe it for us. And then it's, because we're going to sell it to other people, but first person we're going to sell it to is ourselves. Now, this doesn't happen consciously, but we create a story of why we can't. And then we own that story until someone like myself comes along, potentially, or Michael, and says, "Hey, your story is a bunch of bullshit, and here's why." And
exactly. Somebody's going to call me out.
And so that's in essence it. As long as you want to keep that. And I had a CEO I was talking to about a month ago, and we were talking about something, and he was one of those things, well, I'd like to do this, but blah, 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 and he's done very well. And I'm like, all right, you got a $40 million business. You've got a COO. And I kind of knew a little bit about what was going on. I'm like, he's got a lot more control of his time than I believe. So I'm like, well, where is this story coming from that you don't have time to focus on and make this a priority right now? And he's like, he said, I love and hate you at the same time. Like, he didn't really, it's like, I like, it's either you're going to hang up or we're going to keep talking, because the question's on the table and you realize that the question had validity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I love and hate you at the same time myself, because I said something earlier about I want to, dive into NLP, but I don't have the time right now. so I guess you just called me out, didn't you? As
long as you say it's a choice, then just say it's a choice. I'm choosing not to, then that's all right.
100%. Chris, if people want to get a hold of you, where do they go?
Yeah. It's Chris at chrisyonker.com. It's probably the best, and then the name of our business is the Center for Conscious Living and Fulfillment is the name of our organization. But Chris at chrisyonker.com is probably the best resource to go to. You can sign up for newsletter. There's a website also called the greatest years of your life.com. And there's also you can access the vision workbook there if you want to get a copy of it, the one I mentioned earlier. So
love it. It's you and I have had we did a pre-show call that just was like, I was like, oh, I can't wait to have this conversation with Chris. And here we are. You didn't disappoint. This is such powerful stuff. And one of the things that I just want to point out is you do have the newsletter. You do have some things that you can try. If you're listening to this, if you're a CEO that's just like been stuck and just can't figure those things out, give yourself the opportunity to be, tap into the foo-foo, tap into this all soft stuff and my brain or my psychological or my emotions, and just, give it a second to, try a newsletter or 10, and maybe it's the 10th one that you listen to. And I say this because, I had a book on the back of my toilet. It was just sitting on the back there. A friend had given it to me for 4 years earlier, and it just sat there. And I just, for whatever reason, I couldn't pick it up. But all of a sudden, I just looked at it one day and I said, oh my gosh, that might have the answers that I'm thinking about. And it was all, it was talking about your view of the world and the universe and how it all comes together, which I was totally 4 years earlier, I wasn't ready for it. Yeah. I wouldn't have been open to it because of where I was in my space and my time. What do they say? When the student is ready, the master will come. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so I say that to everybody listening, if this even strikes even a little tiny chord, sign up for, go ahead. There's a book too. I wrote a book. It's on Amazon called Soul Intention, SOUL. And then there's a podcast too. Secret Thoughts of CEOs is the podcast too, on Apple, Spotify, Amazon. So yeah. Love it. Well,
thank you.
Chris Yonker, thank you everybody for listening. Make sure you subscribe so that you can get on, future episodes. My name is Michael Columbus with Family Wealth and Legacy, and you have been listening to the Family Biz Show. Thank you so much, everybody. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.